So I'm going to do the cut the wood for the transom now, and it's not drawn in here. I've done a bunch of potential drawings, but I'm going to cut, what did I get down to? There it is. 2 9.5 inch wide by 54 inches long, 1 9.5 inches wide by 50 inches long, and 1 6 inch wide by 28 inches long. So 2 of these are going to cover the top part of the transom, and then this next one is going to be a little bit shy. I've actually got to make sure that I'm still good, because I could actually make this a little bit smaller. And then one that's small, at this piece, a 6 inch tag at the bottom. And I'm using Sapele. I had, I don't remember what this thing was. That's 84. That's 100 and, I think it's like a 14 footer or something like that, which we cut up so I could get home. This was huge. And then that one was a separate piece. As it turns out, I'm going to be able to get everything I need out of these 3. So I'm going to get 2 of these 9.5 wide, 54 long, and this one I'm going to get something 50 plus. I need a total of 72 inches, 78 inches, and this is 84. So I got to go check all the numbers before I go much further. But goal is I'm going to be able to keep this untouched. Also, these are 6/4. I'm going to plane them on one side, plane them on 2 sides, but not a lot. Time to get out the DeWalt 735. I can't remember these bloody names. Yeah, DeWalt 735. And got to open the door. Unfortunately, it's 80 degrees outside, so I got to fiddle with that. And then once they're planed down, pull out the table saw. This big long one, I'm going to cut that to size before I try to, I think I'm going to cut it to size before I try to plane stuff. Just concerned about snipe as usual. Anyway, so I'm going to pull out a circ saw, cut this, and then plane everything. And then I'll start cutting down, because this one is just 10. I think these are just 10. And I'm hoping to do 9.5. If I can't do 9.5 for some reason, I have to reduce it. I'll just, the 6 inch piece I'm going to take out of this, I'll make bigger. So, I was going to try and save 2 inch strips off the sides, do 8 inches. This way, I end up with a whole plank that's untouched. So I think that's better. If I want to laminate stuff, this is long enough to laminate a New Haven stem. If I were to want to do it in Sapele. Anyway, so I got this one piece of wood that's untouched. So this is the rig I used to cut this piece. I had 6 inches left over, so I put 3 inches on each piece, and I'll push one through, and then these other 2 that don't have any extra on them, and then this last piece to the end, so I can keep the snipe on the far ends of these 2 pieces. So I have these 3 long boards, and then one short one down there, and they were rough sawn on the edge. So in order to get a good straight edge, I've seen some people use a long level taped to it. Problem is the width of those boards is such that it pushes the fence off the table, and I really didn't support this very well, so I put tape around this this piece. It's an old one of the pieces I cut off one of the bed logs that I made. And you don't want to put the tape all the way around because it binds, so put it around here, and then cut one edge, lose the bevel, flip this baby over, push it through again, and you get two parallel edges, and it's fairly good. Now, I don't remember which one of these had a bit of a bow. I think it was this one. And so, there go the lights again. So anyway, I used it on this one, and it didn't bind very much, but it did bind a little bit. And the other two and the short one were straight enough, so I went ahead and cut them without this. We'll see if that's going to be enough. But I've still got some damage to cut off. I had originally planned for 9.5 inches. At least this one's going to have to get cut down to 9.25. And they're still way too thick. I don't know if I'm going to bother resawing. I'm going to get them down to, I'm going to get them to the correct widths, and then make a decision if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to resaw, or if I'm just going to plane them down. It's a lot to plane, but it might just be a better way to do this. So there we go. This is back to the full-size patterns, showing the angles for the various positions. There's the outline of there's the outside of the transom and the inside of the transom, the larger one, because it tapers. As it goes back, it tapers smaller. So that's the outside edge, that's the inside edge. And these bevel angles are given here, and I measure them, and the one important thing to notice is that these particular angles, the bevels were set out for 15/16 thickness, and once you do the beveling, then you finish up by smoothing off a 1/16. But anyway, these angles are the distance between these two edges divided by the thickness, 15/16, which I need to confirm if that's correct, at 2381. And you take the arctangent, you get an angle, 29.8, and this one I think I measured at 31 degrees. So it's I wrote down 0.2, but it's 1.2. I must have written. Anyway, these are the bevel angles, and it's for that value. If you make it thicker, as some people have, then you'll just use those bevel angles. And the distance, the problem is, I've set this up with these full-size patterns. Someone's going to use that. So if you use those lines from the pattern, and use a thicker plank, use a 1-inch plank, for example, the angle's going to be too steep, but you'll just have to stick to these angles. And by the way, I'm going to reduce the size to 9 1/4, and then a piece of 8 1/4 at the bottom, and that'll give me 3 big planks here, and then a small one through here, and I should have enough. Should have enough in this region. Pardon the mess, but you know, this is what a working drawing looks like. I decided not to resaw these. My friend the bandsaw, which I can't see very well here, still has drift in it. I haven't been sorted that out yet. So I could have used the table saw to resaw things. Instead, I just used that to dimension everything down to 9 1/4, the width of all the planks to 9 1/4, and they ended up being around 1.5 to 1 1/4 inches. And so I took them, and I must have filled that thing about 3 or 4 times, taking this down a 32nd at a time, and brought them down. It's supposed to be 15/16. We are now, I think I measured 61/64. But anyway, so there they are. You can see there's a little bit of space here. I've got to mess around with that a little bit. I haven't even figured out what I'm going to do. But this is the nice thing about having a full-size pattern, is that, you know, there it is. Fits the whole thing. I could come down a little more if I wanted to. I'm going to stay away from these corners. I have a little snipe on one of the ends, but it turned out really nicely. That's just beautiful. The sapele is very heavy. There's no question about that. I think this is going to look really nice. It has a real mahogany look to it, even though it's not officially mahogany. Anyway, so the planks for the transom are done. Yay! And it's a lot harder to do this in the summer than in the winter. God, it's 90 degrees outside, I think. Here they are. I still have a little bit of a seam evident. This is raised up, so that's a bit of a shadow. If you look at it that way, it's pretty much gone. Same with this one, I think. I used my Grizzly jointer. Which one is this? G0947. It's set at a 64th of an inch. It's not very good. This mahogany is scratching the aluminum top. I probably should have waxed it or something, but I'm going to have to take Scotch-Brite to this. And yeah, the smaller piece, it was okay, but the larger piece, it's hard to handle. But anyway, I had lots of saw marks from the table saw, and that got rid of that. So it's much better than it was. The problem is I probably don't have the table set. I think I have the outfeed table set too high. I have to see. It's unplugged, by the way. But it's so much better than it was. And anyway, so we'll next thing is to drill holes and put in some bronze rods. This is pretty persnickety stuff, but it looks real nice, and hopefully we'll be able to get this taken care of shortly. I was going to use a router, and Nomad boat building has a process where they use a router to clean one edge going that way with put a batten down, go down the length, and then you bring the other and you size it so that the blade is just barely touching. It's just barely touching. And then you route this edge, and then you bring the next piece in so that it's just touching, and you don't move the batten. So, and then you come the other way, and as he says, if you hadn't routed the top piece first, going backward would be rather dangerous. But since it's already been routed, the blade's just skimming on the surface. You end up with two surfaces that are really well matched. Now you probably need to keep them. I think you put some marks on the boards to indicate where they are, but it's it's a jointer-free solution. I suspect there's a better jointer in my future, but this is what we had. It's much better. The problem is I ended up with a bow in this stuff, and so the final things I had to do was to come in on either end and not do the middle, which is a little flaky, and I've just stopped. I'm just going to live with what it is, because at some point, you make it worse, and then you're back to square one. I have to check the lengths on these, the widths on these things, but I'm sure it, maybe lost 1/8 of an inch, and I had plenty. So, well, here. So, yeah, I got plenty of room. Make a full-size pattern, or full-size patterns. I'm about to set up to trim these edges with a router, and but I wanted to get the grain orientation, so I matched these grains together. They were close, and the problem is I've got a crack here. So I originally had this piece up and one of those down, and had this cathedral pattern right here, but I'm not going to be able to do that. This is crack. I've got it. One possibility is I trim this off. That brings this up. I'm trying to stay away from this joint for the notch that's in the near the top of the transom, where the shear strakes come in. Anyway, so this is probably the best that I can do with this lumber. It's not perfect. It should look fine. But I've got straight grain to straight grain, and I've got a cathedral pattern matching somewhat here. Down here, it'll be tucked near the water line, so it should be okay. Question is, where do I place the pattern? Do I put that notch above this, or do I put it below this line? I will be using fashion pieces, so that will help with this joint, so that's probably not going to be a problem. So here's the setup. I've got an 8-foot plywood table, 3/4 inch 4x8 on 3 heavy duty stands. And these are, I've got two, they're bolted to 2x4s. So they're pretty sturdy. And then I've got 2 4x6s bolted, or clamped rather, at each end. 8 foot long, of course. And then I've got a 2x4, little chunk of 2x4 under each end. And then I have another piece of 2x4 here and over there and there and there, clamp just sitting underneath there. And then I've clamped, these are the old bed logs that I made, which I've been using for various things. And so they're clamped up front, they're clamped to the table, and in the back they're clamped to this 2x6, and I've got that on both sides. And then I set this up. Here, let me do that. Shut the power off. So I adjusted this 1-inch Freud router bit, 3/4 wide, sorry, 1.5 inch deep. It's a beast. 1/2 inch chuck. I mark the edge of this blade against the existing edge, or the initial edge of this plank, and mark those curves, those circles, and then put the measure, what is this, a 70-inch, 72-inch rulers, 6 feet, on there. And it's fairly thick, so it's enough that I just had to keep it pressed down. So I clamped that down just a little bit back of the circle, and this is clamped to the bed log. And I have a piece of scrap plywood, so that it's showing up. It's cutting in there. Let's see what's next. Oh, so the first time I went from left to right, and when I finished, and it's the first time I've done it, and this was very nerve-wracking. There's a little bit of a ripple there. And so I did this, I went through the cut on this board, on this top board, twice. And then I brought this guy in just a little bit past the edge that was trimmed into the plywood. And by the way, this is all from Nomad Boat Building. He discusses that. I'll put a link somewhere. Anyway, then so I adjusted this so it was just slightly over the edge of the cut in the plywood, and then I just went back and it cut perfectly. It's just beautiful. A little bit of something there, but I mean, before it was, it was rocking. I should have taken a picture of that, but I'd pinch one end and there'd be a gap of 1/16 of an inch at the other end, so that was terrible. So anyway, let me I did mark these guys so that and there it is. That is just beautiful. I mean, I can't see the other side, but yeah, I think that it's... Now, one thing I was concerned about, since I was clamping this piece back here, I was concerned about it might be rising up, but I'm pressing down really hard as I'm moving along, so I think that flattened it out, and there doesn't seem to be any. Here, let's... Yeah, I mean, let's do this. I mean, there's basically no gap. Now, of course, I've got to scuff it up to put epoxy on it. But what are we going here? There it is. Anyway, so just got a few more of these to do. And then I'll be able to move on. This has been a real headache. I have this relatively short jointer, and that didn't work. I got it close, but it just wasn't good enough. And I tried a plane on it, and actually it just made it worse because I don't have a nice big plane for this. So here we go. My first adventure in routing. These are the boards I just finished routing, and they were really nice and flat 2 months ago. But that was right after I'd planed them. Let's see if I can do this here. So let's see what we got here. Yeah, I guess that shows it best. So clearly, I'm going to replane these things. I am not happy with this. I'm not sure what I'm going to do at this point. Because if I take too much more off, they're at 61/64. And 60/64 is going to be 15/16. All right, let's get this out here. Note, transom pattern bevels are laid out for 15/16 thickness stern. If your stern is different thickness, use bevel gauge above. Glue up 15/16 stock, saw and bevel, then smooth both edges to finish about, both sides to finish about 7/8. I think I have to take another teeny tiny bit off these things. Well, after much humming and hawing, I decided to go ahead and plane these babies again. So there's my setup as usual. So I'm going to mark so that the arrow points to the convex side. So there's a peak here, and then there's a concave side here because it's warped slightly. And number 3, I'm going to be cutting the ends off anyway, so I tried to keep the snipe there. I took some off last night, and I decided to take some more off today. I think I've taken off probably a 32nd from both sides. I'm not sure. I'm going to be looking at that now, but it was enough to cause problems for. I couldn't get the edges straight, and I had not planned to alternate the grain patterns, but given the fact that this stuff is warped on me, I am going to take the recommendation from Greg Russell and alternate the grains. And I'm probably going to try to use longer drifts, which produces its own set of troubles. Anyway, off to figure out how much wood I got left. The problem is, of course, that if I take off too much of this stuff, then I'm going to have to remake the larger pattern. And the way this goes, if you reduce the thickness below 15 16ths, you want to keep the smaller pattern constant and reduce the larger one. Here they are. I've measured them all. 59 64ths. Right, so there it is, nice and. So it's 92.50. 15 16ths is 93.75, 92.50. It's 0.00. No, 0.0. So it's 12 thousandths. That's 0.8 of the 64th. So it's slightly under 15 16ths. So the larger piece will be too large. I'll have to fiddle around with it when I get it on the boat, but I'm going to cut it basically to the size of these things. I'm declaring victory and moving on. I have to confirm. These are flat. I checked these. I didn't. So if we do this on the other side, yeah, I've still got a little bit of light coming through there. And I still got some light coming through there. So it's not completely flat. You know, at some point, the good is the enemy of good enough. I keep saying that. I'm going to have to work with what we've got. I've replaned these planks for the transom. They're flat on edges or in the center. So I'm going to use that to make them flat relative to each other. However, I had this thing set up with the original bed logs. One of them is not flat. It has a nice crown in it. So instead, I took these guys and see these little wedges, Milwaukee angle gauge, and stuff's within 1/10 of a degree. I'm going to declare victory and move on. It's better than this other thing. These are definitely flat. Well, I'm declaring these flat. And hopefully they're flat enough. Here's the setup. In addition to what I showed before, these two are now 1 inch apart. My concern is that this one's going like, which one is, okay, this one's going like this, convex, and this one's concave. I don't want there to be much difference between the plane that this is sitting on when it's cutting this edge versus this edge. So I put them as close together as possible. And I'm going to ride on them. I'm going to ride this platform across this, and it'll ride wherever it rides. These are pressing the center. These are pressing the center. So this is loading the outside edges. This is loading the center. This is the final setup. I had to move these large clamps outboard because I kept bumping into them. I came off. The first cut wasn't a problem, but the second cut I had to do 3 times because I came off this fence and put big gouges in this thing several places. I haven't even checked it yet. We'll check it now and get right back to you. There's a little divot right here. the corresponding one there as well. Not sure what happened, but I'm not doing this again. I'm gonna. It fits. It seems to fit really well. If I. So it is really nice. Can't even see it. But it cost me. Let's see. This board is. Let's see if I can get this. It's 9 and a little less than an eighth. This is 8 and a little less than 7/8. So it took off almost 1/4 of an inch. Well, declaring victory and moving on. Oh, by the way, the router that I'm using is the Bosch 1617 EVS. The Mark Reuten has a Makita. It's a huge Makita. The one thing that this does not have, which his has, is on-off switch on the handles. I was thinking of getting a foot switch. Plus his shuts off, it's got a brake on it. Anyway, that's the router I'm using, and then I talked about the bit I'm using previously. So I just need to get some of these. These are great clamps, but these are too long. I need to get the 6 inchers. If I was going to be doing this regularly, I would have a different setup. This is not. This is a real kludge, which is what I tend to do. Anyway, so moving on to drilling holes in the edges for drift pins.